Across Italy, from the hushed forests of Lazio to the wind-carved plateaus of Sardinia, rise megalithic structures so ancient, so impossibly precise, and so unlike anything surrounding them that they seem like remnants of a forgotten world. Massive walls hewn from stone with no visible tool marks. Pyramids sculpted from single volcanic ridges. Underground cities of tombs stretching in labyrinthine silence. Towers older than the myths tied to them, and corridors carved deep into bedrock whose purpose remains a battlefield of theories. Every one of these monuments fits into the historical timeline, yet never smoothly. Each explains one mystery, only to ignite several more. And taken together, they murmur a question we still struggle to face. What if Italy's earliest monuments belong not just to known antiquity, but to a lost chapter of human innovation we have yet to uncover? In the low, rolling landscape west of Rome, where the Tyrrhenian breeze drifts across fields of wild fennel, and the earth occasionally dips into shallow depressions hinting at hidden chambers, the Necropolis of Cerveteri spreads across the terrain like a buried city. Its avenues and dwellings were not carved for the living, but for their echoes, its tumuli rising as gentle domes of soil and stone that conceal the architectural depth descending beneath them. Walking these ancient pathways, the scale of the site reveals itself gradually. Each mound hides a labyrinth of rooms modeled after houses, with corridors, pillars, benches, and carved beams imitating timber, yet all sculpted from volcanic tuff. The impression is unmistakable. The Etruscans sought to preserve the familiar world in a material more enduring than life itself, as if memory could be anchored in stone. The tombs, ranging from simple single chambers to sprawling multi-room complexes, feel less like funerary repositories and more like architectural experiments where domestic, ritual, and symbolic spaces merge into a single blueprint. They form an intimate record of a culture whose voice has mostly faded from the historical record, leaving behind a vision of a people who perceived continuity between the realms of the living and the dead. This worldview is reflected in the uncanny precision with which these underground dwellings mirror the settlements that once stood above them. Yet even as archaeology confidently attributes the necropolis to the flourishing Etruscan world of the first millennium BCE, contradictions accumulate. Some of the earliest tumuli show construction methods and spatial logic subtly, but distinctly different from later layers, hinting at the adaptation of older traditions whose origins remain obscure. Certain chambers, stripped of their original contents, bear carvings with iconography that finds no clear parallel in the known corpus of Etruscan art. Fragments of a visual language perhaps inherited from predecessors now lost to time. The sheer scale of the Banditacha zone, the largest district of the necropolis, creates an architectural rhythm that exceeds the expectations of a mere burial ground. Its grid-like arrangement of tumuli and streets forms a city plan so deliberate that researchers have long debated whether its vastness served purely ceremonial needs or reflected a deeper cosmological model, perhaps mapping the soul's journey or mirroring the structure of the universe as the Etruscans conceived it. The absence of extensive texts leaves only the stone imitations as clues, their proportions hinting that meaning was once encoded in spacing, alignment, and the symbolic architecture of descent and return. Stepping inside one of the great tumuli, where the air is cool and still, and the walls bear shallow carvings of household objects, the experience becomes disorienting. Shapes of beds, chairs, beams, and doorframes have been petrified into permanence. This recreation of daily life within a space of death raises profound questions. Were these tombs intended as eternal homes? Transitional chambers? Or metaphysical households designed to anchor the spirit in a journey now lost to us? The precision of the carved details implies a belief system both sophisticated and compassionate, one that granted the dead a continuity that transcended the finality we often assign to burial. Yet the necropolis contains complexities that resist interpretation. Beneath some mounds lie alcoves whose function remains unclear, neither distinctly ritual nor domestic, while niches positioned with intentional symmetry suggest they once held offerings or symbolic objects now vanished. In certain areas, carving styles shift abruptly, leaving researchers to ponder whether multiple guilds of stoneworkers were active here, each with its own traditions, or whether the necropolis spans a much longer developmental arc than traditionally assumed, recording phases of practice we can no longer reconstruct. Contradictions extend even to the stone itself. Tough, soft when first exposed, yet incredibly durable once set, has preserved details with startling clarity. Clean lines of pillars and benches resist erosion in ways that make dating through their patterns unreliable, sometimes giving the illusion of greater age, other times of surprising youth. Thus the necropolis sits in a state of temporal ambiguity. Its apparent coherence masks layered evolution, where older tombs were expanded, reused, or sealed by later generations, producing a palimpsest of ritual architecture that defies assignment to a single cultural moment. Venturing deeper, where pathways sink into shallow cuts between the mounds and tomb entrances face one another like rows of silent dwellings, the impression emerges that this was once a ceremonial city, a place with its own logic of processions, gatherings, and commemorations. Its monumental scale reflects not only reverence for the dead, but an attempt to articulate a worldview in which ancestry, identity, and cosmology converged. Though the exact nature of these beliefs remains beyond full reconstruction, suspended in the absence of comprehensive texts, the architecture conveys their presence through its silence. And as dusk approaches, the low sun casting long shadows across the tumuli and catching the carved stone entrances in a soft, angled glow, the necropolis feels less like a cemetery and more like the fossilized memory of an entire society. A place where architecture became a vessel for preserving relationships between the earthly and the unseen, relationships now perceptible only in the spaces left behind. The visitor is left with the lingering sensation that the Necropolis of Cerveteri, despite its archaeological clarity in some respects, retains an interior silence pointing to a belief system we only partially grasp. Its monumental forms endure as a testament to an ancient intentionality, one whose meaning remains suspended, awaiting an interpretive key that may never fully come into view. In the rugged heart of Sardinia, where the terrain folds into undulating ridges and basalt plateaus shaped by long-extinct volcanic forces, the Nuragic rise across the landscape like scattered guardians of an ancient world. Their conical towers emerge from the earth with a solidity so profound that they seem to blur the boundary between geological formation and human intent, for their weathered basalt stones appear almost grown from the ground rather than assembled by human hands. Yet each structure is the outcome of sophisticated craftsmanship by a civilization whose architectural vision continues to puzzle scholars attempting to assign any singular function or meaning to it. Approaching one of the great Nuragic, whether the imposing Su Nuraxi or one of the countless lesser-known examples, one is immediately struck by the sheer mass of its massive basalt blocks, fitted with such precision that they create a foundation both monumental and deliberate. Inside, a system of corbelled chambers, ascending staircases, and tight internal galleries reveals a design that seems to oscillate between defensiveness and ritual purpose. No prevailing interpretation fully accommodates the complexity within these towers, for the Nuragic culture left behind no extensive written tradition to illuminate the logic behind their construction, leaving only the stone geometry and their island-wide distribution as clues. Their positions across valleys, hilltops, ridges, and coastlines form a network so dense it suggests a level of social organization and territorial planning far greater than early theories allowed. Excavations around many of these structures have uncovered surrounding villages, complete with meeting huts, workspaces, and communal areas, revealing societies skilled in metal production, trade, and ceremonial activity, positioning the Nuragic people among the most advanced Bronze Age cultures of the Mediterranean, even as their precise cultural identity remains partially obscured. Contrasts deepen when considering the simplicity of their raw materials, rough, unshaped basalt blocks stacked without mortar, against the remarkable sophistication of the resulting architecture. The internal chambers rise in carefully corbelled arcs requiring an understanding of weight distribution, air circulation, and acoustics, creating spaces that feel both shielded and resonant. Their curved walls taper toward high, narrow apexes that capture light and carry sound differently throughout the day, prompting some researchers to propose ritual or ceremonial functions, while others argue for their defensive role given their massive walls and elevated positions. Yet sites containing multiple towers within a single complex point to an architectural vocabulary more intricate than that of mere fortresses. Across the island of Sardinia, more than 7,000 Nuragic have been identified, a number likely incomplete given the many collapsed or buried examples, creating the impression of a landscape thoroughly inscribed with stone markers. Each tower may have served as a node within a system of territorial signals, water resource management, trade routes, or astronomical orientations. Certain nuraghi align with solstice sunrise points or significant lunar positions, though ongoing debates question whether such alignments reflect deliberate design or are incidental to Sardinia's diverse topography. The absence of consistent patterns makes it difficult to assert a single cosmological model for the builders, suggesting instead a tapestry of localized traditions held together by a shared architectural ethos. Inside, the experience is shaped by darkness and sudden illumination. The narrow entrance and small openings channel the light into beams that fall across the basalt surfaces, exaggerating their rough textures and monumental presence. Climbing the internal spiral stairways, carved into the thick walls themselves, feels less like ascending a building and more like entering a symbolic pathway, one that might once have carried meanings tied to hierarchy, initiation, or ritual movement. But with no written record to guide interpretation, such ideas remain thoughtful conjectures. Archaeology reveals long sequences of use, structures first erected in the Bronze Age, then modified and repurposed through the Iron Age and even into later eras. Many nuraghi form architectural palimpsests, their phases of stonework merging across centuries, complicating efforts to isolate their original forms. This raises the enduring question: do the monumental towers visible today represent the peak of a refined architectural evolution, or are they simply the survivors of a wider range of structures now lost? The artifacts associated with the Nuragic people, bronze figurines of chiefs, warriors, animals, and ritual scenes, demonstrate a complex symbolic universe, yet offer little direct insight into how the towers functioned in social or spiritual terms. The absence of explicit clues leaves open the possibility that nuraghi served layered roles: fortresses, communal gathering places, shrines, territorial markers, ancestral monuments, or varying combinations shaped by shifting needs and beliefs over many generations. Standing beside a towering nurag in the late afternoon, when the basalt stones absorb the day's warmth and release it slowly into the cooling evening air, the structure seems less like a remnant of human engineering and more like a living feature of the terrain. Its silhouette blends with the surrounding hills, dissolving the distinction between architecture and geology. The sensation grows that the builders were deeply attuned to the rhythms of the land, using stone to express relationships between community, nature, and the sky, relationships still faintly legible even though their original meanings have vanished. As dusk settles and the landscape sinks into shadow, the nurag remains motionless yet overwhelmingly present, its chambers empty, but its mass still charged with intention. It feels rooted not just in stone, but in memory, communicating a worldview shaped by endurance, vigilance, and a sense of time measured in centuries carved into basalt rather than in written histories. And the visitor departs with the unmistakable impression that the nuraghi, through their multitude, their resilience, and their inscrutable purpose, stand as monuments to an ancient ingenuity whose full story continues to lie hidden within Sardinia's enigmatic past. In the center of Rome, where modern streets coil around remnants of the ancient world and the city's layered past vibrates beneath every paving stone, the Colosseum stands not merely as a ruin, but as a monumental incision through which the strata of time remain visible. Its sweeping arcades rise like the exposed ribs of some engineered organism built to contain both spectacle and authority, and even in its architectural familiarity, the structure preserves subtleties often overshadowed by its fame. For behind the widely known stories of gladiators and public games lies an architectural mind at work, one so exacting that the amphitheater's very form becomes evidence of ancient experimentation on an enormous scale. Its elliptical design distributes force, movement, and sight lines with a grace that contradicts the violence once housed within it. As one circles the perimeter, running a hand along the weathered travertine blocks sourced from the quarries of Tivoli, the intricate harmony of arches, piers, and vaults becomes apparent, revealing a mastery of engineering that almost clashes with the fragmented textual records describing its construction. It suggests that the Romans, drawing from deeper Italic, Etruscan, and broader Mediterranean traditions, were inheritors of knowledge whose origins are more complex than surviving documentation can reveal, the accumulated expertise of countless artisans whose names remain absent from history. Inside, where tiered seating once fanned outward in mathematically modulated gradients of class and privilege, the acoustics and sight lines still echo a geometric logic, so refined that even contemporary stadium architects continue to emulate its principles. Yet below the arena floor, The hypogeum spreads out in a labyrinth of corridors, cells, and mechanisms, an underground theater of logistics where engineering fused seamlessly with illusion. Its network of hoists, pulleys, cages, and service passages formed a hidden world beneath the spectacle. A system so intricate that much of its function must now be pieced together from grooves, post holes, and stone scars, since all wooden components have long since vanished. Attempts to reconstruct its chronology reveal contradictions. While the amphitheater's inauguration under the Flavian emperors is well attested, successive repairs, renovations, and changes of use have obscured the initial logic behind certain features, particularly the array of subterranean openings whose arrangement suggests functionalities not entirely utilitarian, perhaps ritualistic or symbolic, now largely beyond recovery. And then there is the velarium, the colossal retractable canopy. Though literary accounts describe a naval corps specialized in manipulating it, the exact rigging system capable of spanning such an immense area remains only partly understood. The anchor points still survive, but the coordination required to operate the canopy remains a puzzle, with scholars debating the precise mechanics of what must have been a remarkable feat of synchronized labor. Even its material composition speaks in multiple registers. The amphitheater's skeleton, composed of travertine, tufa, brick-faced concrete, and specialized mortars, reveals shifting Roman architectural priorities over time. The use of pozzolanic concrete enabled arches and vaults of unprecedented scale, yet the precise mixtures responsible for its extraordinary durability in some contexts and quicker decay in others remain imperfectly reproduced today. These variations suggest a reliance on experiential knowledge handed down through generations, rather than strictly standardized formulas. As earthquakes fractured the outer ring over the centuries, the remaining arches form a broken outline that reveals as much as it hides, like a massive architectural cross-section subjected to geological forces. Even so, the building maintains a structural coherence that reveals the Romans' anticipation of stresses beyond everyday use, embedding redundancies and distributing weight through interlocking systems that allowed the monument to survive long after others succumbed to collapse. Whether these choices reflect inherited craftsmanship, empirical trial and error, or a deeper grasp of structural dynamics remains an open question resting somewhere between archaeology and ancient engineering philosophy. Walking along the upper tiers, where surviving staircases spiral upward with controlled precision, one senses the intentional choreography of movement embedded into the design. Tens of thousands once flowed through its entrances, its vomitoria, engineered to empty the stands with astonishing efficiency. The gentle curvature of its passageways and the interplay of shadow and filtered sunlight through archways create a rhythm that suggests the architects understood not only the behavior of materials, but the psychology of crowds, shaping spaces meant to impress, direct, and envelop. Yet despite its global recognition, the Colosseum preserves a quiet enigma in its deeper purpose beyond entertainment. While it clearly projected imperial authority and structured social hierarchy, its placement atop the drained lake of Nero's demolished palace and its integration with surrounding complexes imply overlapping layers of symbolism, political, spatial, and perhaps cosmological, woven into its construction. Such interpretations remain debated, but their very existence reflects the monument's capacity to hold multiple meanings, functioning as a civic manifesto in stone as much as an arena for spectacle. As night falls and amber lights wash over the surviving arches, the Colosseum shifts from a celebration of engineering to a meditation on what has been lost. Its vacant corridors and exposed hypogeum conjure a tension between certainty and speculation. And the visitor senses that hidden beneath the familiar history lies another narrative, one of ancient techniques inherited from metallic predecessors, of engineering decisions born from instinct and tradition, of symbolic layers reshaped by centuries of repurposing. The amphitheater remains suspended between clarity and mystery, its scale unambiguous, yet its full intent forever incomplete. A vast relic of another world, speaking in the silent language of stone about ambitions and meanings that continue to elude us. The Cyclopean walls of Alatri rise with a quiet, immovable authority, an authority that feels older than the town itself, older even than the stories layered across this ancient landscape. Their geometry is too deliberate, their craftsmanship too unwavering, to be dismissed as mere remnants of a vanished age. Instead, they feel like a message left in stone from a time that resisted being fully remembered. These immense, angular blocks, interlocking without a trace of mortar, pressed together with such precision that the intention behind their arrangement becomes impossible to ignore. It is as if some forgotten hand once possessed the knowledge to persuade unyielding rock into shapes and alignments capable of outlasting the fragile sweep of kingdoms, names, and archives. Walking along the perimeter, where the polygonal masonry tightens into immaculate joints, one senses that these walls were never simply the boundaries of a fortress. They are the remnants of an architectural language now only half understood, a language that blends astronomical alignment with an uncanny command of the landscape. The great Porta Maggiore, with its towering trapezoidal frame, faces the horizon as though engaged in a dialogue with the land rather than merely serving a defensive function. And the Acropolis, crowned by stones fitted like the facets of a single, monumental thought, holds its vantage over the valley with a composure that makes any assigned chronology feel provisional at best. Though scholars attribute these structures to the Italic peoples and the Hernici tribes, the stones themselves resist such straightforward categorization. Their weathering suggests exposure not in centuries but in epochs, bearing scars of seismic shifts and climatic passages that complicate the neat narrative of regional development. Yet the mystery extends beyond age. It lies in the method. No clear evidence survives of tools capable of carving such massive boulders into perfectly contoured, seamless forms. No marks reveal how these stones, some weighing many tons, were lifted, rotated, and locked into place with such intention that even modern engineers note the absence of settling or displacement, despite earthquakes that reshaped everything else in the region. Thus, the walls sparked debate between opposing theories. Were they the result of a slow refinement of Italic stoneworking traditions, or the sudden flowering of a skill now lost? Deeper within the Acropolis, the geometry becomes even more insistent. Angles that appear to reference celestial events, terraces aligned to solar arcs, doorways echoing other polygonal sites across Italy. These similarities hint at a shared body of knowledge rather than isolated invention, though any cultural threads that once connected them have long since dissolved. Archaeology adds another contradiction. Artifacts and pottery reflect known periods of Italic occupation, yet the walls themselves stand apart from those layers, as though inherited and repurposed by later peoples. This phenomenon mirrors other ancient sites where monumental foundations outdate the structures built atop them. Such tension creates fertile ground for speculation. Visions of vanished workshops, forgotten guilds of master masons, or an ancient current of knowledge that briefly surfaced here before sinking back into prehistory. These hypotheses endure not because they can be proven, but because the stones themselves refuse to fit neatly into the timelines built around them. Instead, they suggest that their makers were guided by principles beyond mere utility, principles of proportion, balance, resilience, and perhaps symbolism encoded in mass and form. And as the sun descends, casting gold along the edges of the blocks, the contours that emerge feel too deliberate to be accidental and too enduring to belong solely to the historical period to which they are assigned. The result is a sense that the walls are not simply ancient, but untethered, belonging to a broader cycle of human ingenuity, mastery, and forgetting. Countless theories attempt to explain them, from lost traditions to misunderstood ceremonial landscapes, yet none fully account for their ambition and precision. And so Alatri remains suspended between explanation and wonder, its Cyclopean walls a testament to an age that cannot be fully placed, shaped by a mastery that cannot be fully named. They leave the lingering impression that beneath Italy's familiar past lies another stratum of intention, carved into stone with a patience and authority that still holds its silence, as though awaiting a question we have not yet learned to ask. Across the northern plains of Sardinia, where quiet fields stretch toward a horizon softened by coastal haze, and the land carries the faint undulation of ancient geological memory, the Monte Dacodi ziggurat rises with a geometry so unexpected that it appears, at first glance, like an anomaly from another world. Its stepped silhouette recalls distant Mesopotamian ziggurats, yet here it stands alone on an island with no architectural kin to root it within any familiar lineage. Ascending the long, gently inclined ramp, one senses that the structure was conceived not merely for access but for ceremony, a ritual ascent inscribed into the landscape. Every step feels like a deliberate movement, guiding ancient participants toward a summit whose purpose has stirred debate for generations. Beneath the visible stone lies an even older phase, a massive mound of earth and rock shaped into a truncated pyramid. Its construction required a sophisticated understanding of weight distribution, soil compaction, and spatial symmetry, emerging in an era when Sardinian settlements are believed to have consisted of modest, dispersed communities. The ambition of Monte Dacodi feels almost singular, as if a moment of extraordinary vision crystallized here, before fading from the island's broader archaeological narrative. Only scattered traces, sacred wells, megalithic tombs, and the later Nuragic towers, hint at fragments of a worldview now mostly lost. And Monte Dacodi predates the Nuragic world by millennia, placing it in a period where Mediterranean cultural connections remain partly speculative. Its resemblance to Near Eastern prototypes raises questions that resist easy conclusions. Neither simple diffusion nor isolated invention fully explains it. The structure incorporates local stone, local building techniques, and an alignment that appears tuned to Sardinia's celestial and seasonal rhythms. If outside influence ever reached this island, it seems to have been absorbed and reshaped into something uniquely Sardinian, a hybrid monument belonging wholly to neither world. The contradictions deepen in the stratigraphy. The earliest phase aligns with a Neolithic culture whose other works were megalithic, but not architectural on this scale. This suggests either an extraordinary surge of innovation or a ritual necessity, so compelling it demanded a new mode of monumental expression. Later additions, such as the stone ramp and outer platforms built during the Copper Age, reveal a long sequence of reinterpretation. Layer upon layer suggests that different communities inherited the mound, each inscribing its own cosmology onto the site. Monte Dacodi thus becomes a temporal palimpsest, not the product of one belief system, but a tapestry of evolving ritual landscapes. Artifacts scattered around the platform, ceramic fragments, animal bones, traces of pigment, hint at ceremonies that may once have drawn participants from far beyond the immediate region. The presence of a large upright menhir near the base of the ramp reinforces the idea that the complex once included a ceremonial plaza, now lost, where gatherings, offerings, and perhaps astronomical rites unfolded in harmony with solar and lunar cycles. Yet the absence of written records leaves only spatial logic and architectural patterns as clues to how the monument choreographed the movement of people and light. Monte Dacodi carries an ambiguity unusual even among prehistoric monuments. Its form is recognizably monumental, yet its purpose oscillates between interpretations: altar, sanctuary, ceremonial platform, cosmic axis, territorial marker. None fully captures its layered history. It is as though the meaning of the structure shifted along with the communities who inherited it, each projecting new symbolism onto its enduring form. The stones bear witness to this evolution, some reshaped or reworked, others worn smooth by countless ritual ascents, still others displaced or eroded in ways that hint at periods of abandonment or reinterpretation. As Sardinia's cultural rhythms changed over millennia, so too did the monument's role. Walking the ramp today, stones warmed by the Sardinian sun, the plains dotted with remnants of ancient villages and buried fields, one feels the peculiar blend of clarity and mystery that defines Monte Dacodi. Its geometry is unmistakable, an engineered expression of elevation and boundary. Yet its intention remains suspended between familiarity and strangeness. A ziggurat-like form without a zigguratic tradition. A ceremonial mound unanchored to any surviving myth. A Mediterranean monument standing apart from Mediterranean norms. As evening approaches, slanting light casts shadows along the ramp and across the summit, outlining the platform's contours in a golden gradient. Its angles appear both deeply ancient and strikingly modern. The surrounding silence evokes the possibility that this site once served not only ceremonial functions but also orientation, spiritual, communal, or astronomical. Its elevated vantage may have encoded meanings tied to seasons, migrations, or ancestral narratives now lost to the currents of deep time. And so Monte Dacodi endures as a solitary enigma, a monument that cannot be comfortably placed within any single tradition or chronological frame. Its layers of earth, stone, and ritual intention point toward an ancient effort to shape the relationship between humanity, landscape, and sky. An effort that left no clear explanation, yet persists in the enduring geometry of its terraces, a bridge between the visible and the unseen. A bridge weathered but still standing, silent yet compelling, as though waiting for an interpretive key that may lie not in its stones, but in a fragment of history that has yet to be revealed. In the dense woodland north of Rome, where volcanic ridges break into muted clearings and the undergrowth carries the scent of moss, soil, and thyme. The so-called Pyramid of Bomarzo rises from the forest floor with a stillness that feels intentional. Its stepped terraces emerge from a single basalt outcrop, shaped not through construction but through subtraction, carved downward rather than built upward, as if following a logic that does not completely align with the ceremonial models scholars typically propose. These terraces ascend with a rhythm that is at once architectural and geological, blending the raw permanence of cooled lava with a pattern that suggests repeated use, refinement, or significance across a span far longer than any surviving inscription could confirm. The steps, precisely cut yet softened by centuries of rain and falling leaves, lead the eye toward the rectangular basins etched into the upper surfaces. Their purpose remains unsettled: altars for rites, channels for offerings, or perhaps functional recesses tied to practices now lost. Yet their arrangement hints at an understanding of water flow and celestial illumination that challenges assumptions about the tools and techniques available to the region's known cultures. Complicating matters further is the absence of clear cultural signatures. Though the pyramid lies in territory once inhabited by the Etruscans, its form matches neither their tomb architecture nor their temple engineering. Instead, it suggests a solitary experiment in sacred geometry, a monument aligned with the contours of the hill and the orientation of the sky, echoing older expressions of ritual landscape across prehistoric Italy. This dissonance between established cultural patterns and the singularity of Bomarzo has quietly divided researchers. Some view the site as a priestly retreat or an astronomical observatory. Others argue for multiple phases of occupation in which successive groups reshaped the stone to their own uses. A smaller, more speculative faction wonders whether it predates the Etruscans entirely, an artifact of a community whose identity dissolved long before recorded history reached these woods. Standing at the summit, where the highest platform opens to a sky framed by treetops, one senses that the builders were not merely carving functional steps, but articulating a dialogue between earth and elevation, a space where ritual, movement, and perspective converged along a single ascending path. Yet the absence of artifacts or companion structures renders the monument strangely isolated, like a sentence without its paragraph, or a surviving fragment of a ceremonial complex lost to erosion, landslide, or the patient reclaiming of the forest. Contradictions linger in the stone itself. The surfaces bear erosion consistent with great age, yet certain cuts remain unexpectedly sharp, raising questions about whether the monument was periodically reworked or whether basalt preserves form with a deceptive persistence. The terraces, though uneven in preservation, retain proportions that reveal an underlying symmetry, evidence that the builders attended not only to the steps but to the spatial relationships between platforms, vantage points, angles of ascent, and the shifting of shadows throughout the year. Such details imply a sophistication difficult to reconcile with the absence of similar structures nearby. And so the pyramid stands in a perplexing quiet, its terraces collecting autumn leaves and holding winter snow, offering no inscriptions to claim its makers and no definitive traces of the rituals once performed upon its stone. It encourages speculation about forgotten cults, seasonal observances, territorial markers, or ancestral commemorations, each plausible yet unprovable, each echoing a wider pattern across Italy, where monumental intent survives but cultural context fades, leaving behind the architecture of memory without its story. As the last rays of afternoon light slip through the forest canopy, catching the basalt in a muted shimmer, the structure feels less like an artifact and more like a threshold, a point where the boundary between certainty and possibility thins. It invites contemplation of how many such forms once stood in now transformed landscapes, how many gestures carved into stone have been erased by time's quiet insistence, and how the Pyramid of Bomarzo, solitary yet resonant, endures as a testament to a knowledge that once found expression in the shaping of volcanic rock into ascending plains, a knowledge now concealed within the forest's embrace, waiting for questions we have not yet learned to ask. In the dense core of Rome, where centuries of streets twist around the ghostly outline of an older city, the Pantheon rises with a calmness that feels strangely detached from the surrounding bustle. Its rotunda stands not only as an architectural feat, but as a quiet riddle, one whose apparent simplicity conceals layers of ambiguity, contradiction, and intention scholars have debated for generations. For although the inscription on the portico attributes the monument to Marcus Agrippa, the structure that survives today belongs firmly to the Hadrianic era. Yet its conceptual roots may stretch far deeper into Rome's architectural memory, drawing on traditions that reach across the Mediterranean world, and perhaps even from earlier Italic sacred sites now lost. Approaching the Pantheon, the first impression is one of perfect harmony. The orderly colonnade of Egyptian granite, the pediment once gleaming with bronze, the broad steps that originally faced a different urban landscape, all suggest a temple that has always been precisely what it appears. But this impression dissolves the moment one steps into the rotunda, where the immense dome unfurls like a crafted sky. Its coffered hemisphere is so flawlessly balanced that it seems to defy the fragility of ancient materials, raising questions about how Roman engineers achieved a concrete span unmatched until modern architecture, and whether the progressive lightening of the mixture toward the oculus reflected standardized knowledge or a refined craft intuition, now only partly recoverable. The oculus, a perfect circle opening directly to the heavens, anchors the structure not merely to daylight, but to a cosmological logic encoded in illumination. Throughout the day and year, its moving beam traces deliberate paths across the interior, lighting altars, niches, and thresholds with precision that suggests the building functioned as a temporal mechanism, marking celestial rhythms in ways that transform the rotunda into a dynamic interplay of architecture and astronomy. The deeper ritual significance of these illuminations remains uncertain, inferred from fragments of Roman religious tradition, yet never fully confirmed. Inside the rotunda, height and diameter resolve into a perfect sphere that feels carved from light itself. Yet behind this luminous illusion lies a masterful sequence of materials. Heavy basalt reinforcing the base, gradually lighter aggregates rising toward the dome's crown, ending with pumice around the oculus. This gradient reveals not only engineering foresight, but an intimate understanding of weight, tension, and cohesion in large-scale concrete construction, details no surviving treatise fully explains. Interpretations of its purpose remain contradictory. Though long described as a temple to all the gods, its interior arrangement and absence of definitive cult statuary hint at a function blending religious, dynastic, and ceremonial roles. Some scholars argue that the rotunda embodied imperial ideology, its dome echoing the celestial sphere and linking the emperor to cosmic order, while others see it as a monumental expression of philosophical ideals tied to the Hadrianic court's fascination with geometry, harmony, and the universal. Beneath the present floor lie remains of Agrippa's earlier structure, destroyed by fire, and beneath even that are traces of older sacred activity, suggesting a ritual continuity predating imperial reconstruction, though obscured by successive rebuilding. Moving through the interior, the marble revetments, giallo antico, porphyry, pavonazzetto, form a chromatic map of imperial reach. Each stone, quarried from distant provinces and transported across vast networks, reflects not only aesthetic judgment, but the logistical and political machinery that sustained Rome's monuments. The alternating niches and recesses generate a rhythmic visual circuit, guiding the gaze around the circular space and evoking movement within stillness. The bronze that once clothed the portico, later stripped for papal use, left traces revealing that the original facade was more ornate than what survives. Variations in column thickness and spacing point to logistical adaptations during construction, proof that even a seemingly perfect building like the Pantheon bears marks of compromise and evolving design decisions. Yet these adjustments blend seamlessly into the whole, masking their complexity. The building's endurance, through earthquakes, fires, and the shifting fabric of Rome itself, underscores an engineering resilience still partly mysterious. While the distribution of mass and the use of relieving arches contribute to its survival, the full combination of factors that preserved the dome while others collapsed remains under study, hinting that certain construction choices emerged from empirical knowledge no longer preserved in written form. As daylight moves and the oculus beam sweeps across the patterned marble floor, shifting in an ever-changing arc, the Pantheon reveals itself as a living organism of light. Its interior becomes a dialogue between stone and sky, a reminder that the structure may hold meanings far beyond conventional temple architecture, blending cosmology, power, ritual, and philosophy. Yet the absence of definitive records leaves its full significance suspended between certainty and speculation, inviting interpretations that oscillate between analysis and imagination. At sunset, When the oculus glows faintly and the dome's coffers fade into shadow, the sense deepens that the Pantheon belongs both to Rome's recorded history and to a more elusive lineage of architectural thought, one in which geometry, craft, and intention merge into a form that resists full explanation. A heritage shaped by skill, inherited knowledge, and a worldview that saw architecture as a bridge between human order and the celestial realm. In this tension between clarity and enigma, between engineering mastery and symbolic depth, the Pantheon endures as one of antiquity's most profound architectural statements, its meaning still unfolding across centuries, forever inviting interpretations that may never completely resolve the quiet mystery held within its perfectly balanced sphere of space and sky. In the forested heartlands of southern Tuscany, where the hills seem to fold over one another like softened layers of an ancient seabed and dense canopies hush the wind, the Etruscan Vie Cave emerge not simply as roadways carved through stone, but as narrow, sunken corridors where the earth has been sculpted into passages of startling verticality. Their tufa walls rise like sheer cliffs, enclosing the traveler in spaces that feel simultaneously intimate and monumental, evoking the uncanny sense of walking through a memory embedded in the land rather than a structure shaped by human intention. Some of these deep-cut corridors drop more than 20 meters into the volcanic bedrock, their precision and scale resisting straightforward explanations. While they clearly functioned as routes of movement, the steepness and depth of many Vie caves seem far beyond what ordinary travel required. The immense effort needed to cut such deep trenches into the earth suggests a significance that extended beyond practical transit. Many corridors link Necropolis to hilltop towns, their walls faintly etched with niches, worn carvings, and erosion patterns that imply ceremonials or symbolic roles. These may once have formed ritual pathways guiding the living toward the realm of the dead, spaces where the threshold between worlds was navigated not abstractly, but through the deliberate shaping of the landscape itself. Yet the purpose of these roadways remains clouded in contradiction. Dating them is notoriously difficult. Tufa erodes and reshapes over centuries, softening tool marks and blurring archaeological clues. Although the Etruscans undoubtedly used the Vie Cave, some scholars suggest that the earliest cuts may predate Etruscan settlement, hinting at even earlier Italic or Bronze Age communities whose traces have largely vanished. Other interpretations propose hydrological functions, drainage channels, irrigation pathways, yet the careful curves, measured intersections, and deliberate heights point toward planning that surpasses purely utilitarian goals. The small niches carved at regular intervals further suggest purposes tied to ritual or symbolism, now obscured by time and the erosion of meaning. In certain sections, the walls rise so steeply and the trench narrows so suddenly that daylight descends in thin shifting bands, creating an ever-changing choreography of light and shadow. It is easy to wonder whether this dramatic effect was intentional, transforming the act of passage into a journey of descent and emergence, mirroring mythic narratives found in later traditions. Walking these corridors today, one encounters surfaces etched with the record of water flow, plant roots, and centuries of footsteps. Rain-carved streaks run down the walls, mimicking the marks left by ancient tools, blurring natural erosion with human craftsmanship. Some Vie intersect with others at sharp, geometric angles, forming networks that seem to map forgotten patterns of movement across the hillsides. The absence of settlements or fortifications directly above them hints at a system whose visible pathways remain, while the cultural structures they once connected have vanished. At certain entrances, narrow carved steps climb to small platforms or vantage points whose ancient uses remain unclear. In other places, small openings in the walls reveal shallow chambers, perhaps once used for votive offerings or storage, though their irregularities make definitive interpretation elusive. The Vie Cave also possess an acoustic quality seldom emphasized in formal studies. In their narrowest stretches, sound reverberates sharply, footsteps echo with clarity, and voices resonate with a haunting quality that transforms the corridor into a natural amplifier. Whether purposeful or coincidental, this auditory dimension adds yet another layer to their complexity, suggesting the possibility of ritual chants or processional recitations once reverberating between these walls. More contradictions arise when considering their varied distribution. Some corridors lead directly toward Necropolis, reinforcing funerary interpretations. Others end at springs or natural water sources, implying practical uses. Still others connect settlements indirectly, bypassing more efficient paths, suggesting symbolic or territorial motivations. The lack of standard width or uniform depth implies that these passageways were reworked over generations, each community modifying older routes to suit evolving needs. The soft nature of tufa, easily shaped when freshly exposed yet hardening over time, raises further questions. How much of what stands today preserves the original vision, and how much has been transformed by centuries of erosion, root systems, and rainfall? Walking through one of the longest surviving Vai cave near Sorano or Pitigliano, where the walls press so close that the sky appears only as a narrow ribbon above, the experience becomes overwhelmingly liminal. The modern world seems to fade just meters overhead, while within the corridor moss clings to upper ledges, and the air cools abruptly in shaded sections, creating an impression of a secluded microclimate sealed from the surrounding landscape. Emerging suddenly into the bright Tuscan sunlight after such confinement feels ritualistic, an abrupt shift that seems too profound to be accidental. Within this interplay of darkness and emergence, enclosure and revelation, practicality and symbolism, the Vai cave reveal themselves as far more than simple roads. They appear as carved arteries of an ancient landscape whose cultural pulse has faded, yet whose physical pathways persist, silently resisting straightforward categorization. Their intent may be fractured by time, but the sensory experience of traversing them still conveys a lingering presence, an echo of the worldview that shaped them. As evening drapes across the Tuscan hills and shadows within the corridors lengthen into deep vertical bands, one senses that these sunken pathways once held meanings now only partially recoverable, formed by societies whose relationship to land expressed itself, not through structures built upward into the sky, but through passages carved downward into the earth. And in their enduring ambiguity, part engineering, part ritual, part unresolved mystery, the Vai cave remain among Italy's most atmospheric ancient creations, testaments to a worldview in which landscape, movement, and memory were inseparably entwined, their original purpose still hovering just beyond reach.